Hello and welcome. This is the Fit for Privacy podcast, the podcast for professionals. I'm your host Punit Bhatia. In this podcast, we talk to influencers so that you get to listen and learn from their experiences and thoughts. Remember, this is not legal advice, and if you need one, please contact a professional with your situation. So let's get started. Hello and welcome. In the Fit for Privacy podcast, today we have a very special guest, Rob Masson. He is the CEO of the DPO Center, and you outsource the DPO activity, right?
That's right.
So tell us something about what is it that the DPO Center does.
Okay, so we consider ourselves to be a data protection officer resource centre. So we have a team of DPOs that are kind of dotted around the UK, and we place those individuals into organisations on what we call a fractional basis. So that's anything from 1 to 8 days per month. And in that time, what we're doing is we're taking on the responsibility, or day-to-day responsibility for the data protection officer role, and we are helping that organisation first off to understand their data and the steps they need to take to comply, and then helping them to implement an appropriate compliance framework and to manage it on an ongoing basis.
Right, so it's for the companies who need a DPO but maybe don't need it full time.
I mean, that's predominantly what it's there for. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of organisations, the GDPR has brought down the bar in terms of where the cut-off point is for an organisation needing a DPO. It's far from black and white, because there's this concept of large scale, but in most cases it's reasonably obvious. And so that bar has been brought down, meaning that more organisations now need to appoint that DPO. But of course, exactly as you say, they don't need to be full-time or even part-time.
Right.
Now, a lot of organisations tend to job share, so they would tend to assign somebody within the organisation who has an alternative role to be the DPO. But of course, the GDPR has, along with it, the obligations for the role. It means that you must avoid a conflict of interest. So it's quite difficult to find somebody in an organisation who is both senior enough to have the responsibility of the data protection officer role, but not so senior that they are then deemed to be in a conflict with effectively their fiduciary duties to represent the needs of the organisation. So outsourcing the role is actually ideal because you get access to a third-party individual who isn't subject to the conflict of interest, but also you get someone who is potentially more experienced, has a wide level of experience. And that's especially so within our team, simply because we are recruiting data protection officers who have many and varied background, but also are part of a much larger team. So that much larger team, within there, we will have covered pretty much every possible scenario that an organisation can be subjected to. And therefore, even if the primary DPO that we've placed into that organisation doesn't know the exact answer, then somebody within our team will do. And that's really where we differentiate ourselves between maybe an individual consultant DPO or a contracting DPO. So we've got that team, we've got the depth of knowledge in there to support the organisation in every scenario.
So essentially, it's a center of excellence for data protection.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a reasonable way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, the person in front may not know it as you say, but he will come back and the resource pool, somebody would have done it. It's good for the people because they learn a lot. They're not stuck to one scenario, one situation, one industry.
That's right. And we would expect the DPO to know it in most cases anyway, but I think it's not a question of know and don't know, it's more a question of interpretation of the GDPR is very much grey. It's also highly dependent on the risk appetite of the organisation. So the decision you make for one organisation might actually be very different to the decision you make for another, purely because the risk appetite, on the scale of risk appetite, is very different. And so where our DPOs get the most value from the wider team is just in the balance of opinion. It's about this is the issue. These are the factors that are influencing my recommendation. In the case of this organisation, I think this is the right approach, the right suggestion, the right advice to make. Does anybody else have an opinion? And we have an internal process that enables all the DPOs to kind of exchange information and just support each other in making sure that we provide the client with the most balanced and appropriate decision for their industry sector, the regulation, the environment that they work in, and their risk appetite.
So essentially, they are hiring a resource in essence, but behind it, there's a full process, full mechanism to provide them the right advice and a balanced advice.
That's right. And so there's the advice side, but there's also the compliance framework side. Yeah. So we've built up a very comprehensive model documentation library. So we have all the policies and the processes and the logs and the registers and all the things that, all the basic tools that a DPO needs in order to be able to do their job. But of course, we've already created all of that, so it means that the DPO is not reinventing the wheel, as it were. If they're an individual DPO within an organisation, they're probably going to have to go and create that, or pay lawyers to create it, or go and Google it and try and put something together. Whereas obviously we've built that up, based on our experience and the various scenarios that have kind of cropped up with organisations since we started in July 2017. And so it's been it's another extremely valuable aspect of the service that we're able to deliver.
Absolutely, I think that's the key in GDPR, the interpretation and then the validation of that interpretation. If you can do that, it makes life easy.
Indeed.
Okay, so we typically have 3 sections. The first section is more to warm up. I know in this case it doesn't look like we need some to warm up. But so still, what do you love about privacy?
I think it's the people, to be honest. I mean, it's a fascinating industry sector to be in. I mean, I'm a techie, I guess, by education and by industry. I've started and grown various organisations since I was 18 years old, and been fortunate enough to have reasonably positive exits from each of those. But I've been employing teams of developers over the years. And I must say it's quite refreshing in a way, without being too rude, to be in the privacy industry, because everybody has a very professional attitude towards it. There are varying levels of knowledge and experience, and sometimes that gets some organisations into a little bit of trouble, because a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. But fundamentally, privacy professionals, almost across the board, are trying to do a positive thing for that organisation. Yes. They are leading them on a journey that is based upon the principles of the GDPR. It is there to improve the environment and the processing of data for us as data subjects. And so, and that's the bit that I really like about it, in that everybody's pushing in that direction and everybody's exchanging information. It's a very open sector. I mean, it's great to be part of it in all the networking opportunities and the events and conferences. And I notice it from almost being an outsider, if you like, until a number of years ago. I've come into the sector compared to the other sectors that I've been in, mostly the techie sectors. And it's just really nice to see how much people kind of collaborate and exchange information between them for this common goal of really just doing the right thing on behalf of their organisations.
It's a new sector. I mean, data protection has been there for years. I meet sometimes people who've been in data protection for 20 years, 22 years, but quite few of them, handful of them. So that's where this people thing or collaboration thing comes along, because people are just getting used to it and organizations are getting used to it. And let me switch it a little bit differently from privacy. If you were to choose between time, money, and fitness, what would you choose? It's a cliche question.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say fitness or health. I think because in a way you can't enjoy time or money unless you've got your health.
Yeah.
So I suspect I'd put that one at the forefront. Fitness is very important to me. I'm a triathlete and I do some crazy kind of runs, ultra runs in various places around the world. And so I take my health for granted in a way, probably inappropriately, but for me, it's the balance of is to be able to work hard and to train hard, and and that's almost what enables me to do what I do. But I certainly I think time is obviously very important. I think my wife and daughter would probably agree with that one. And sometimes a challenge to balance it. We're growing a fantastic business. It's all encompassing as entrepreneurism, as it is, and and so it consumes a lot of time.
Absolutely.
But as I say, without your health, I think everything's a bit pointless.
Yes, that's very true. And if we were to summarize GDPR in one word, what would it be? Yeah, one word.
I think I struggle with one word, but
okay, two.
Yeah, I mean, return of ownership. I think
return of ownership. Describe it a bit.
In terms of data, I mean, I think the GDPR, what it's trying. I know it's slightly kind of utopian view of it all, but what the GDPR especially is trying to do is to give back control to us as data subjects. So when we give an organisation our personal data, it's not just kind of lost and it now belongs to that organisation and they can do as they please with it. The GDPR, difficult as it is to enforce, I know, but is trying to give us back ownership, and I think that's kind of, I think, quite fundamental to what we're all trying to achieve. Is respecting the individual's rights that we've been given under the GDPR and a lot of other data protection legislation that's coming in. It's there to make sure that our data is not abused.
Right.
And that element of taking back control. In the old regime, the organisation could effectively do as they please with your data. Now, some are abusing it, but generally speaking, in an idealistic way, we now have control of our data, and if we don't want someone to process it in the way that they're doing, as long as the lawful basis is appropriate, then we can request that they no longer do that. And so, that, I think, for me is the most beneficial underlying aspect of something like the GDPR.
Right, and it's also like people say it doesn't solve everything, but you have to look at it. If it was not there, you have a bigger problem.
Yeah, exactly. And enforcement's always going to be a problem. You've got some extremely rich and powerful organisations that even the regulators have trouble keeping under control. But fundamentally, as I said before, that the people in the industry generally, certainly within privacy, are all hopefully moving us all along in the right kind of direction, and giving us back that control that the likes of the GDPR is trying to afford for us.
Sure. And you meet a lot of people, and you're also quite active on different events. So in your view, what would be the kind of percentage of companies that would be compliant? Because when you talk to people, some say, well, nobody's compliant. That's an extreme view.
Yeah.
And we know not everybody's compliant. So where's the bar? Where's the balance? Do you have an indication?
I think I'd probably agree with the no one. I mean, compliance is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And the problem is that the world changes on a daily basis.
Yes.
And so what you thought was being compliant today won't be what's accepted as being compliant tomorrow. And when I say accepted, I mean, obviously there's new legislation coming along, so depending on who you're processing data on, if you are compliant with the GDPR, you may not be compliant with CCPA, and I know that GDPR is kind of presented as the gold standard, but even so, there are elements of something like CCPA where what you're doing for GDPR isn't compatible necessarily or directly comparable with CCPA.
Right.
And so, and we are in a massive period of change at the moment in terms of global legislation. So, the ability for an organisation to be to tick a box that says we are compliant, is a challenge. And I think it's probably something that's effectively, to a degree, unachievable, because compliance again is a risk-based scenario. So we are compliant to the level of risk that we are happy to maintain to adopt, and so and therefore in order to be able to continue to do business, different types of organisations need to take different risks.
Right.
And if all your competitors are not doing something, then it's an extremely difficult expectation to have as a DPO on that organisation that your organisation will stop doing that because it's not commercially viable. If they do so, they'll be effectively out of business. So, what we're looking for is kind of the best practice scenario. It's working out what is acceptable to that organisation in terms of level of risk. And documenting and being accountable for it, the decisions that are made, and being justifiable, not playing fast and loose, but having justifiable reasons for making those particular decisions, acting in good faith from a legal perspective, are all that add up to yes, we're compliant.
And I think as you rightly say, it's about risk tolerance and risk appetite. There is not like one gold standard you'll take and apply. It's not a just click next approach. It's applicable based on what you want to achieve, where you want to be, and how much risk you want to take.
Exactly that.
And is there something about privacy that annoys you?
I mean,
not the cookie statements.
No, well, there is that. I mean, I think generally no. I mean, I think that there have been some silly issues crop. I mean, the one when GDPR first came out, it was all this issue around consent, and everybody needed consent for everything, or they thought they did. So it's kind of some organisations still have this ingrained perception that you still need to get consent for everything, and I mean, it's quite refreshing in a way when we as an organisation go into our clients' organisation and say, no, you don't have to do that. There are these other lawful bases that we can perfectly legitimately use to enable you to continue doing what you're doing in a totally lawful and compliant manner.
Absolutely.
And so that was certainly kind of one of the other things. I mean, I guess purely from my specific area within privacy, we do get a lot of kind of director level people in organisations who have been acting as DPO, and they're kind of not necessarily aware of the obligations in terms of conflict of interest. And so that's something that crops up a lot. So, but it's entirely understandable for certainly the smaller organisations where job sharing is just it just has to be. And I'd much rather see one person with a dual role acting as in as good faith as possible and positively as possible in both roles, than for the role just to be forgotten and therefore not considered within the decisions being made within that organisation.
Sure. So if we move on to the other part of it, where when we say how is compliance going on, or compliance with the law, let's put it like that, what's the key challenge companies or organizations are facing from the ones you are talking to?
People. I mean, I think from a data protection perspective, I mean, it's important to draw a line between what we class as data protection and what is considered kind of cyber security.
Yeah.
So there are, for us, there's quite a firm line between data protection, which we consider to be people, policy, and process,
right,
and the IT cyber security side, which is generally, it's also people as well, but it's systems and platforms and software and things like that, and it's tools that mitigate risk, managing those tools, rather than managing the people that are using those tools and the expectations that are put on them. So for us, it's in order to take an organisation on a journey of compliance, you have to take the people.
Right.
And that starts at the top. You have to have a sponsor. Ideally, you need a governance committee, where you've got hopefully kind of key information asset owners from the organisation that are sat on that committee, and they are helping to create communication between, especially for a large organisation, between those information asset owners, or the champions, if you like, of data protection within the organisation, and the data-facing staff.
Right.
Because even if you've got one DPO and you've got 1,000 employees,
yeah,
that's very challenging to get good quality communication going
right.
on. So you have to have buy-in from the other people, and the data-facing staff have to have the appropriate policies in place to
yes.
guide them as to what the organisation's expectations are on them in
right.
terms of processing data, and to help them to identify when certain situations arise. If you don't know what a data subject access request looks like, then you can't discipline a member of staff
yeah.
for not recognising it,
yeah.
and not informing about it. So that policy, that training, that awareness, is all part of enabling the organisation to form some kind of compliance. And without that, you're nowhere. So start with the people, and if you can get the culture right, and you can get the organisation kind of moving in the right direction and thinking data protection, then you're 80% there. I mean, literally.
I think it's all about establishing a culture, an environment of wherein privacy is recognized as the day-to-day function rather than one-off.
Yep.
So that's from company perspective, that its people are the challenge. But what is the challenge from the data protection officer's perspective? Because you have lots of them.
We do.
Yeah, and you also meet some others. So what is the common challenge or biggest challenge that they are having? Or maybe two.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's around the people. I mean, if it's not the data-facing staff, then it's the kind of management. You've got to arrive at it from both ends. In that you have to get a sponsor. You have to have someone
right.
high up in the organisation who is driving the
yes.
culture. The fact that it is our organisation expects you to comply with
right.
data protection laws, and it is your responsibility as a responsible employee to avail yourself to the necessary information, to read the policies, to be aware of what's going on. And if you can get that, the implementation of the framework. So the logs, the registers, the policy, the procedures is all fairly functional. It's all you can just do that. But
right.
unless the people are going to use them, and buy into them and accept them and make good use of them, then ultimately you will fail at data protection.
You can make the best laws, you can put the best policies, best procedures, but at the end of the day, people need to follow them.
They do.
And if people follow it, a little bit of gap in a process or in a procedure can still be worked out.
Yeah, and so the data protection is there. The office is there to monitor all of that.
Right.
To make sure that that's happening. Provide advice. When required. Use the stick in the nicest possible way when required. When people don't like change. I mean, complying with data protection rules requires change.
Yes.
We have to stop doing what we've always done and start doing it in another way. And it's how you take the organisation on that journey, and how it's communicated from the top down. In a positive way, not just the stick, but the carrot as well, mostly the carrot. And if you can do that, if you can achieve that, then as I say, you're way down the road when it comes to your organisation, being compliant with legislation.
Absolutely. And when we talk of GDPR, people often associate it with fines.
Yep.
And then there's a conversation that a small business who's maybe worth 4 million, 5 million, or say less than the amount of the fine, and if they get fined 10 million, 20 million, will it not kill business? I was listening to another interview, and they were also talking about that US, they're flourishing, they're having this entrepreneurial culture and innovation because there's a little bit of more flexibility, while in EU, there are too many laws, and then GDPR is almost killing small businesses. What's your view about that?
I mean, I think I would much rather that my data was being managed within European data laws than I would within US data laws, for a start. So I don't have a problem with the level of legislation that Europe has set down, and we've got more coming on, privacy regulations coming along. It's only going to get worse. But in terms of the fines, I mean, I think the 20 million euros, the 4%, all that, that's that's only relevant to the biggest of the big boys. Yeah.
Right.
And it's highly relevant because it makes boards sit up and listen.
Yes.
Yeah. Under the old regime in the UK, at £500,000, £500,000, a large-ish organisation can budget that kind of money. They can, and therefore it's kind of like, right, well, we're going to take a risk that we're going to get fined the maximum because the biggest risk is £500,000, but we're going to make £20 million. The upside is 20 million, and therefore, we'll do. It's a commercial decision. We'll do that. Yeah? But under GDPR, you can't do that. I mean, you can't take that risk. The board won't sign off that level of risk anymore, and therefore, it forces a culture change, an attitude change towards compliance. So that's first of all, that's the good thing about the 20 million 4%. But I cannot imagine the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK ever finding an organisation to the point where it puts them out of business. Yeah, the fines, the penalties will always be proportionate to the organisation. Yeah. Now, the organisation might decide that they're going to close themselves down, Cambridge Analytica being one of them, but that's more, I suspect, to do with the potential class actions, or group actions as we call them in the UK, that will follow. And when you get the lawyers involved, especially on the kind of no-win, no-fee basis that is starting to creep up.
Yeah, in Europe?
To a degree. There's a few adverts around that we've seen. Yeah, absolutely. And so it is beginning, and they're the ones that won't really care about proportionality.
Right.
Yeah. So, as I say, the ICO is going to penalise you to the point of it being very painful. But the lawyers are the ones that will put you out of business.
So, end of the day, it's about making you feel the pain, but not go out of the business unless, of course, there are factors beyond the privacy fines.
I mean, we don't have much to go on at the moment. So we've got Doorstep Dispensary, who really is the first organisation to be properly fined under GDPR, actually, penalty issued. Whereas we've got Marriott and British Airways, they've been, the ICO is minded to fine them 183 million and 99 million. So big amounts of money, but then, in terms of organisation size, they are all proportionate.
Right.
Yeah? So, it's, as I say, it's kind of proportionate to the pain that kind of organisation is going to be felt. We obviously don't know the outcome of the British Airways fine as yet. Hopefully it's coming out soon, but the final number, assuming there is a number, will be announced soon.
Yes. So normally we have a third section which is more about the human factor in privacy, but what I sense in our conversation so far is you're always referring to people and you're always bringing in the human factor. But still, in that section or in that part, I like to ask you, how do you stay up to date? Because there's so much going on in field of data privacy. I mean, a few weeks ago, I was reading the newsletters I subscribe to, and there's so many laws getting passed. There's the Washington Act, the New York Act, and everybody now, at least in US, it's state-wise for now. So how do you get to stay in touch with all this information? Or you say, I don't know what you say.
I mean, for me, it's vital that we stay up to date, because obviously that's our business. Our business is knowing and being able to advise organisations about upcoming regulations. And so, as an organisation, we invest a lot of time and money in making sure that we are being exposed to all of the sources of information out there. So, we subscribe to all the newsletters and so on, and I spend hours a day reading those kind of things. But we're also, as an organisation, we subscribe to data guidance, so we have access to their portfolio of information on all of the world's legislation, and they're maintaining and keeping it up to date. So it's a hugely valuable reference tool, as far as we're concerned. So the DPO Centre is about to release its own communication method. So we created this thing called the DPIA, which is it's the DPO Centre's assessment of what's the impact of the news, data protection news that's been going on recently. So we're just, we're putting a kind of an information source of our own together.
It's a monthly newsletter or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much newsletter. It's really just, it's 30-second resumes of the important things that have gone. It's specifically for DPOs. Yeah.
Blog for DPO, vlog for DPO.
So it'll be by email.
By email.
Yeah,
okay.
and so it's really just we are scanning as an organisation. We are scanning the news of what's going on. It's really us collating that, sifting out all of the noise that isn't so relevant to a DPO, because there's lots of cyber security and things like that, and other legislation issues and compliance issues, FCA and things like that. And we're trying to distill it down to what is relevant to the role of a DPO, and it'll be a periodic, every couple of weeks, and it'll just be a resume of this is what you need to know. And that's, we're just in the process of about to start. So
very interesting.
Yeah, no, it should be a fun one, that one.
Yeah, I will subscribe.
Thank you. That's one subscriber anyway.
No, the two, I think you will subscribe as well.
Oh, that's true. That is true. Yeah, no, very much so.
And you have staff, so they
yeah,
also subscribe. So
yeah, I'm sure my
you're
wife
already in
will
double digit. Okay. One of the other challenges is being a DPO or being in privacy field is very demanding.
Yep.
It takes a lot out of you. Of course, you need to stay up to date, but there are a lot of priorities. There's stakeholders, there's regulator, there's IT. Everybody wants you if you're in the privacy field. So how do you recommend people to balance this out?
I mean, for me, it's surrounding yourself with a good team of people. It's sharing out that responsibility and not trying to be the only person that's kind of dealing with it. And that's the only way that, for me, in my role in the DPO centre, I have to have, and I'm extremely fortunate to have an amazing team of people around me that support our goals as an organisation and the direction that we're heading. And so that's the most fundamental part as far as I'm concerned. And when you're sharing things out, then you can achieve so much more than if you're something you're trying to do solely for yourself.
Yeah. And if somebody comes along to a DPO and says, I will solve one of your biggest challenges. So you mentioned people earlier. What would that challenge be for the DPOs you have, saying, I like to solve this?
Yep.
So what biggest challenge would they like it to be solved, apart from the people aspect of it?
I mean, most organisations come to us to say, ask us, are we doing it right? Yeah.
Okay, so it's validation.
Yeah, so we do a lot of auditing, compliance audits, where we've built up our compliance audit process, and really all we do, we're going into an organisation and saying, right, let's compare tick boxes, shall we? And make sure that what you've done is in line with our expectations for the type and size of organisation that you are. That would come. We produce a recommendations report in terms of what needs to be steps need to be taken, and how to go about mitigating those risks. And of course, generally that will lead on to us then helping them on an ongoing basis through support from a DPO in resolving it. But I mean, I think it's it's data mapping. It is records processing activities, conducting DPIAs, vendor risk management.
That's a big one.
Always gets kind of a bit forgotten. It's such a huge time-consuming area that in terms of the due diligence process, in terms of getting written agreements in place, making sure that you've got appropriate communication between you to support satisfying individuals' rights requests, breach reporting, all these things that.
So now you're adding up everything from GDPR as a challenge.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, fundamentally,
If you add the records of processing, the DPIA, the data breach, and you name it, then the entire GDPR is a
That's right. I mean, but in a way, that's our job. I mean, we are looking at GDPR holistically and saying, where are you at as an organisation? Where have you got to? And most organisations that we come across, certainly the ones of reasonable size, did a formal exercise pre-May 25th, 2018, and they ticked a bunch of boxes. They kind of did okay. They've got the various general policies in place, and they did okay. But on the whole, they haven't done a great deal since. And the reason for that is they put a project team in place.
Yes.
And it was, here's May 25th coming along, here's some resource and a budget, tick the compliance box. And they did that, and generally did a reasonable job at it. But then they went back to BAU and they didn't maintain that team of people to maintain it on an ongoing basis. And so, we don't see data protection as a project. We absolutely see it as a ongoing kind of cyclical process.
Right.
And that's part of the DPO role is to make sure that they are keeping up to date with what's going on. And so in terms of the big issues, new software is getting put in place. So potentially that's DPIAs that need to be conducted. Is your records needs to be maintained. As an organisation, you're probably going to be engaging with new suppliers and vendors on a weekly basis, and therefore that needs to be taken into account.
I think everything you do in your business needs to be reviewed and looked at.
Yep.
Is it privacy compliant? That's how it's getting to, and that's the culture shift. I mean, because we would otherwise run through all the GDPR requirements once more.
Yeah, and I think they're the big. I mean, and then the final one is obviously training and awareness.
Right.
I mean,
I think that's a very big one.
Yeah.
Because you train staff and then you don't know if they know it enough or not.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we tend to obviously test people to a degree afterwards, so there'll be
quizzes
a
or
review.
tests.
Yeah, exactly. And if they don't reach a certain pass mark, then they're put back into the process to go through it again. And that's in the nicest possible way. We're trying to just move people along as comfortably as possible. But performing training like that is extremely expensive. Not just from a cost perspective, but a time.
Yeah.
If you've got to put all of your staff, even if it's a 1 or 2 hour face-to-face training session, which is kind of the minimum starting point, it's a hugely expensive exercise, for an organisation. So, it's not surprising that it's a bit kind of, we'll do that next week, and then 3 years later,
it's still not done.
We kind of realise that not much went on between 2018 and now. So, but that's what we're addressing. That's what we do. That's what we solve for our clients on a daily basis.
So, like all good things, they must end. This also has to end. So it was great to have you. But before we close in, any final message you want to pass to our audiences?
I mean, I would say find a good DPO. I would say
find a good DPO.
Find a good
DPO from the DPO side.
Well, there's that one as well. I mean, that I would certainly advocate. But get good advice.
Get good advice.
Get someone who can give you good advice.
Yes.
There's lots of privacy professionals out there. Many of them are prepared to give advice sometimes without cost, and there's huge numbers of resources out there that can be utilised in order to gain the information you want. But make privacy part of your organisation's culture. Right. Drive it home. From the top down. Just to make sure that it is instilled within that organisation. And when you do that, then you're going to be much better prepared for what can be described as the onslaught of legislation around globally that is happening right now. I mean, obviously a lot of it's coming from the US, because you've got effectively what will be 50 different flavours of CCPA, coming out across the various states. But in every other continent and country, the same is happening, and you have to have someone in the organisation that has got their ear to the ground of what's going on, because you will not be able to guide your organisation appropriately unless you are getting the view of a privacy professional in helping you to make the appropriate strategic decisions.
To get a good DPO or a privacy professional, if you need a DPO, and that's the bottom line. And of course, get the sponsorship from the top, so that the whole hierarchy gets aligned and driven towards a privacy culture.
That's right. I mean, you don't have to have a data protection officer, the official role,
right?
If you don't meet the mandatory criteria. But you need a data protection professional. You need a data protection manager, or someone.
Calling privacy champion, privacy sponsor, privacy leads, but somebody in the organisation who at least understands that he needs to go and consult a privacy professional.
Yeah, and taking some responsibility for the steps that the organisation is taking. And so even in the smallest of organisations, there should still be somebody that thinks privacy.
Thinks privacy.
And obviously as you grow, then of course you will start to hit the criteria where they have to be a data protection officer, and therefore the requirements of the GDPR and the official services that a DPO must provide to that organisation in an independent manner then become a requirement.
Absolutely. So great having you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Rob Masson. Do post, click like, comment. What do you think about this? Share your feedback. Until next time, thanks and stay blessed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you liked this effort. Please do click like, comment and share. It is okay if you did not like it. Please still do make a comment and share with us what we can improve. If you have suggestions, ideas for guests, or you want to have your question answered, please email me. My email is info@punitbhatia.com. You can also share this with others, and if you do so while tagging me in, I will personally thank and acknowledge your contribution in coming episodes. Thanks once more and look forward to seeing you back in 2 weeks. Remember, this is aired every alternate Thursday at 8 a.m. Till then, stay safe, stay blessed and stay happy.